Jennifer Manili here with another Reddit story for you. I focus on stories that involve substance abuse in some ways, mostly from the family side of the journey, family members coming in, asking for advice, asking questions. So today's story is coming from the Am I the A-hole thread, and it's Am I the A-hole for refusing to forgive my drug addict BIL, which stands for brother-in-law. I had to look that up. So let's see. My brother-in-law, Stephen, is a drug addict. To feed his addiction, he has lied, manipulated, and stolen from just about everyone, including me and my wife, as drug addicts have a tendency to do. He has also spent time in both rehab and jail. From me personally, he stole money, a TV, and a computer. More importantly, about 2 years ago, he stole the watch I inherited from my dad, who passed away when I was 10. Stephen knew when he stole it what the watch meant to me. It was pretty much the only thing I had left of my dad. After that, I told my wife and my in-laws that I was done with him. He was not welcome in my home. I would not go anywhere he was at, including their home. At the time, my wife, Sarah, supported me in this, and I think this is totally reasonable. Stephen got done with another stint in rehab about 3 months ago. According to Sarah, he is clean now and is even working a part-time job. She told me that she wanted to invite Stephen to Thanksgiving dinner. I said no. I didn't care if he was on drugs right at that moment. I think he meant to say I didn't care if he was not on drugs right at that moment. I don't want him in my house. She kept talking to me about this for about a week, and I refused to agree. Thanksgiving gets here, and when I go to open the door, my mother-in-law and Stephen is standing there. I said that he was not coming in my house. My mother-in-law said that she wants to have Thanksgiving dinner with both of her children. I said she's not doing it here. And quite frankly, I'm kind of in agreement up until this point. At this point, Stephen says he wants to apologize to me. I told him that I would forgive him when he gave me back my father's watch. And until he does, he can stick his apology. This upsets my mother-in-law, who starts crying. Stephen is going on about how he is different now. I told him that I didn't care and I don't believe him anyway. At this point, my wife says that I should let the past go. I told her there was no way in hell I was letting it go, and that if she wants to eat dinner with her brother, the thief, she can do it somewhere else. But it wasn't happening here. Sarah tells me it is her home too, which it is. I tell her this is my home and I come before her brother in this house. I would never ask her to let someone she didn't want into our home, and I deserve the same respect. Sarah asked me what was more important, her brother or a stupid watch. I told her my watch was all I had of my father, and I value it a hell of a lot more than a drug addict thief. All of this is happening in the doorway as I refuse to move to let him in. At this point, Stephen says he'll go and turns and walks away. My mother-in-law goes with him. My wife is furious, and we have dinner alone in total silence. The next day, mother-in-law calls my wife. Stephen had gone out the prior night, and when he got home, he was obviously high. Mother-in-law and Sarah were saying this is my fault as I upset him. Stephen has now disappeared, and no one knows where he is. Mother-in-law is frantic, as she is every time she pulls this stuff, and Sarah is telling me that I goaded Stephen into doing drugs again, which sounds like complete BS to me. So am I the a-hole for refusing to tell my idiotic brother-in-law stealing my dad's watch is fine? So there is so many dynamics here. The one thing that I'm going to say about the brother-in-law in the situation is where this happens quite often, someone is in that state of mind and they do happen to steal from family and friends. It doesn't matter who you are. It could be your own mother, and it probably was. And this is where I'm pretty clear about if this person has not earned the right to enter into my sanctuary, then they don't enter into my sanctuary. To avoid issues like this. So if they steal something even one time out of my home, they're not going to be invited into my home until I feel like they're safe enough to invite. And that's my boundary. And that is something like, I don't necessarily feel like I need to completely cut someone off all the time, but I'm certainly not going to let them into my home. So I will go out, I will visit them in other people's homes, and I will kind of love them from a distance. And it's not to be mean, but it's just, one, it's for my protection and it's for theirs as well. Because when you really think about it, if you given the opportunity, they will always steal from you, but then they always will have to deal with the consequences of them stealing from you and the pain that comes along with that. So a lot of times I think people really just assume that these are emotionless people, that they don't give a darn about anybody but themselves. And in that state of mind, that is probably pretty accurate. Actually, I know it's pretty accurate, and they may not always openly admit it out loud, but there's so much shame that goes along with this situation that they're not going to be so ready to admit all of the shame that they're feeling. So giving them that kind of like option is not doing well. So letting them know that like, hey, you did steal from me. This is part of the consequences until I feel like you're safe and ready to come back into my sanctuary when you're, sober. So then they can't steal something so sentimental. But here's the deal. This brother-in-law stole something very sentimental that this poor guy can never get that back. The other thing that I'm going to say very quickly is that 3 months is not a very long time in the whole grand scheme of things. Now, I know from Stephen, the brother-in-law's point of view, this probably seems like an eternity, and even to the family members like associated, because they probably haven't seen Stephen with 3 months in a pretty long time, right? But in the whole grand scheme of things, given the situation and giving that was such a sentimental thing, that is not long enough to feel like, someone is ready to forgive yet. I think forgiveness is a lot more about us than it is about the other person. But I think 3 months is a lot to be asking. And it was very clear what the boundary was. So that's the other thing where it's like mother-in-law has a part in all of this. And she's not taking responsibility. And so you see where it's kind of like sometimes, even though the person that needs a different kind of help is the person that's using drugs, but it doesn't mean that the families couldn't use some support too, because, part of all of the addict's journey in the like healing and self-discovery is starting to take responsibility for their actions. It's really hard to do that as long as you have family members that aren't allowing you to take responsibility for your actions, like mother-in-law and sister both blaming you for something that's not your fault. It's never the addict's, or it's never another person's fault that someone else used. That's part of the journey of figuring out how to deal with life on life's terms, is dealing with hard situations. And this was obviously a hard situation for everyone, but it doesn't excuse behaviors that are absolutely in control of, like these behaviors are in Stephen's control. He didn't have to go get high. He had another choice and he chose to go get high anyway. So anyway, that's what I'm going to say for this post. Now, I have a longer version where I dive much deeper into this topic and into some of the comments on my podcast. It's the Unbreakable Boundaries podcast. You can go check that out, unbreakableBoundariesPodcast.com, where the story is there if you want to hear a longer form. Anyway, looking forward to our next story together.